You're listening to the Frequency and Flow podcast with Brie Couric, episode number 48. In this episode, I'm going to be discussing what is typically the second major inflection point in the journey of a soulpreneur, making the decision to go all in as an entrepreneur, and how to navigate that pressure that you'll face at this point in your journey. This is the third episode of a 6-episode podcast series that I'm calling the Pressurized Soulpreneur. In this series, I'm going to be discussing and contemplating the impact that these pressure centers, your human design pressure centers of the head and the root center, can have at different stages in a soulpreneur's journey. From the initial business idea to scaling your business, how you can recognize these pressures and how you can manage them in relation to your own intuition. If you haven't already, go back and listen to the first episode of the Pressurized Soulpreneur podcast series, episode number 46, How Your Human Design Pressure Centers Impact Your Business, and go forward episode by episode from there. If you're all caught up, then let's dive in. I quit the last corporate job that I had without any sort of plan. I knew that in my mind, I wanted to start a business, but truthfully, I didn't have a clear idea on what my business was or was going to be. I didn't know who I wanted to serve. I didn't know how I was going to serve them exactly. I didn't know what made me, like my services, unique either. I just had this dream that I wanted to start my own business. And before I jump into this story of me leaving, going all in on my business, I do want to acknowledge the immense privilege that I had and still have, that I benefited from navigating this situation as someone who's white, who's cis, het, able-bodied, a female who, one who at the time that this happened, I was living with a partner and did have the security of knowing that I would never end up homeless or without the very basic necessities in life. I think that's really important to acknowledge because as I reflect on my own story, there's many decisions that I made that were much easier knowing that I had this privilege, and that others in similar situations might not even have the opportunity to consider such a decision because they don't have the privilege that I inherently have. So this acknowledgement is super important given this story that I'm about to tell. I'm just going to continue on by saying that when I was at that point where I just knew I was ready to quit my job, I had hit a dead end in terms of the career path that I was on. I absolutely hated what I was doing. I hated who I worked for. I hated the clients that I had. And the stress of the job itself and the stress that was kind of, the stress of the people around me and the stress that I was allowing to build up within myself, it was impacting my own mental health more and more each day. I knew that there would be a day when I was going to hit my limit with that job. Like it grew exponentially, like the pain grew exponentially. And I knew that there was one day I was just going to say, F it, and I wasn't going to be able to handle it anymore. And so I started saving as much of my paycheck as I could. And I tried as hard as I could to push whatever that quit date was going to be out as much as I could so that I could save up as much as I could before it happened. But suddenly, I just knew that that date that I was going to quit and leave my full-time job was fast approaching because I just was struggling to manage my stress. And it was continuing to get worse, and I couldn't keep up with the level of stress that I was feeling. And so I knew there was a point where it was going to come, that date where I needed to leave my job was going to come pretty quickly. And funny enough, as I was coming to this realization, there came a huge turn of events at my job. And I'm not going to go into that too much now, but I will just say that it became very, very, very clear, 3 verys needed, that my expiration date at that company had arrived. And so I decided to resign. And when I did resign, it came with a huge wave of relief that I got to finally like be able to take care of myself and manage, figure out how to manage my stress in a way that was sustainable. And at the time when I did resign, I did have a small cash safety net and absolutely no idea what I would do next. Like I said, I had this idea that I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know any of the details about it yet. And that is where my entrepreneurship journey truly began. I had inadvertently gone all in, like quote unquote, all in on my business. And slowly I started picking up OBM clients, online business management clients. And within a year, I would say almost exactly a year, I was fully booked out as an online business manager with, like I had something like 8 clients when they normally recommend you only have 2 to 3. I was fully booked out and beyond. And that's that's the gist of my soulpreneur origin story. And in a way, it's kind of a relatively typical origin story that you've probably heard some version of like many, many times before, where I got sick of the job I had. And so I went out, and within a certain amount of time, I was booked out, and yay, everything was great. But the truth is, and this is, I feel a little bit of a vulnerability hangover already before I've even said anything. But if I were to do this all over again, like if I were to take these steps and this journey all over again, I would actually do things very differently when I came to this inflection point of going all in on my business. I will say I don't regret prioritizing my mental health. I don't regret taking my career into my own hands in a way that I had never done before. And I don't regret the priorities that I had in making each of these decisions. But in many ways, well, some ways, I do regret going all in on my business so early in my journey as an entrepreneur, as a soulpreneur. And I can't necessarily change that now. But like I said, if you're at this inflection point in your own journey, and you're here listening, if I were to do this all over again, starting from like scratch or being in that situation right before I had resigned from my job, that is something that I would do very differently. Because what you don't see in that quick overview I gave you of my own story, and what you don't see in the origin stories of many other online entrepreneurs, is what actually happened behind the scenes of that journey. I told you a lot about the public external facts. I quit my job. Within a year, I was booked out, like beyond booked out. Those are the external like things that I was showing the world, but there were other things happening behind the scenes. The fact that I casually just glossed over an entire year in my story from quitting my job to being booked out. What happened in that year? How did I go from no clients and no business idea to a fully booked out business? I mean, the truth is I took very simple but incremental steps to build my business and to build my client list. But what isn't told in that story, or what isn't inherent in that story, is the financial stress that I experienced that was equal to, if not more harmful than the stress that I was experiencing at the job that I left. It was a very challenging time that introduced all sorts of stress and anxiety for totally different reasons, but I was feeling just as strongly and was impacting me just as strongly as the stress and the anxiety that I was experiencing from my job that I had resigned from. What also isn't told is that during that year of going from resigning to fully booked out, that I took on not just one, but multiple part-time jobs unrelated to my own business. Those jobs funded not just basic necessities like rent and food and things like that, but those part-time jobs also funded the marketing and startup costs of my business. What's also not mentioned about that year, that year from zero to hero, to use like colloquial kind of marketing and storytelling terms, what's not mentioned is how I very seriously considered going back to full-time corporate work, and had even at one point, well, this is after the year mark, but about a year and a half ago, I seriously contemplated going back to full-time corporate work, so much so that I found a job, got a job offer, and accepted that job offer. And side note, only that company actually rescinded my job offer after I had an actual start date. It was a few days before I was supposed to start, but that's a different story for a different day. What is important about it is that I had gone to lengths to, even though my business was at a place where it was consistent, I still had the urge or felt the call to go back to full-time work to stabilize myself financially. What else isn't mentioned during that year-long, zero to hero journey is the fact that while I started my own business to create more freedom in my life, I was working at least just as much, if not more, hours pursuing my own freedom than I had worked most of my corporate life. The last job I had crazy high hours, but for most of my life, I was working like a 40 to 50 hour a week job. And to get my business up and running and to serve all of those clients, I was working way, way, way more than 50 hours a week at that time. Another thing that's glossed over, and this is maybe the final thing for now, is the impact of this decision on the most important relationships in my life and the extra work that I had to do as I navigated those road bumps in those relationships. So I give you all these very real and tangible examples of like what was happening behind the scenes in that magical year from going from nothing to fully booked out, because there is so much glorification of going all in on your business. That is what is shared. That's what's publicized. That's what many people are encouraging you to do, like many business experts out there. There's a lot of guidance, a lot of advice that's telling you to burn all your bridges so you can focus on doing what it takes to succeed, or of putting all your energy in on this one thing, like where your attention goes, energy flows. Like there's a lot of that out there where people, these quote unquote experts, tell you to just throw everything aside and go all in on this business. And I personally, as someone who is a coach in that respect, and someone who is, a marketing expert who works with a lot of newer entrepreneurs and soulpreneurs, I see person after person take this advice, desperate to make their entrepreneurship, their soulpreneurship dream work. And while some do succeed, and almost everyone succeeds in some capacity over a certain amount, like a longer timeline. But many, in similar ways and different ways from how I experienced it myself, they suffer, like dearly, dearly suffer trying to make this business dream work. And that beneath the surface stuff that I'm sharing right now is not talked about often, and especially not as often as the glorification of the actually making that leap to go all in itself, which is why I want to shine a light on this inflection point specifically through the lens of this pressure that we experience through the head and root center of our human design. And before I even get into like more of the details of this, I'm not saying you shouldn't go all in. And you'll see as I go into this, like it's almost like the too long didn't read. I'm not saying you can't, the TLDR, for those of you hip on the acronyms, it's not that I'm saying you can't go all in on your business. I'm not saying that it was a mistake that I went all in. I'm just telling you that because many of you, if not all of you, are feeling this pressure to go all in, if you haven't already, that there's ways that you can distill and discern whether it's the right decision for you and when it's the right decision for you. And that's what the topic of this podcast episode is. What this inflection point of going all in on your business comes down to, truly, this one thing that it comes down to is your willingness to take on risk in relation to your ability to manage it. That's it. Creating a situation that maximizes the potential of your business on a solid enough foundation of safety and trust that works for you and you alone. Well, you and your family, those people that need to be involved in this decision, right? Ultimately, like that is what you're here to do. And as you take steps forward in your business, it's about balancing and mitigating that risk of taking the leap with having a solid enough foundation and like feeling secure and safe enough with the foundation you've created to make those two things balance so that you can take steps forward in your business. An important thing to think about or to ask yourself is, how does your body handle the stress when your security, your way of being and way of living is at risk? That particular, like handling that stress, is more correlated with your root center and the pressure that your root center experiences. But also, how does your mind navigate that stress during what can be an emotional roller coaster of highs and lows as you're building your business? And how does it manage the emotions to avoid the high highs and the low lows that can pile on and add more stress? Both of those things are important and need to be considered as you make this decision. That navigating that stress and like the emotional highs and lows as you go through the journey of building your business, that's more correlated with your mind center and the pressure that your mind center experiences. So it's important to figure out or to ask yourself if you're putting yourself in a situation where the stress of the insecurity and the lack of safety are actually going to inhibit the growth of your business. No matter how much time and space you give your business, if you're constantly in a state of fear, of insecurity, it's going to be detrimental to your business rather than beneficial, because insecurity stifles creativity. And stifled creativity stalls your growth, it distorts your attraction field and your connection to your audience and your soulmate clients. If you're doing everything from a place of fear, your soulmate clients, your audience are going to sense that. And it distorts your entire like attraction field, to get a little woo-woo on you. And decisions that are made from a state of fear are rarely aligned with your intuition, and they're rarely intuitive decisions, which means that you could inadvertently venture down a path that's just not right for you because you're making decisions from a place of needing and wanting security versus serving others at the highest level. And some people are naturally better equipped to handle this risk and stress than others. And it's truly up to you, no one but you, to know this about yourself and to check in with your intuition to assess this for yourself, because everyone is different. And this is something that you need to understand about yourself before you make this decision. I personally thought that I had a really good risk tolerance. And it turned out that my sense of safety and security were greatly impacted making this leap, where I struggled with it for over a year. I mean, I even had a sustainable amount of clients and revenue coming into my business, and I was still feeling that fear. I was still feeling insecure because being an online business, your revenue fluctuates every month. And so even though I was financially okay, the fluctuations were also causing me a big level of stress and causing me, more stress than I had ever anticipated before I decided to make the leap into my business. There's certain human designs for sure, like getting outside of the pressure centers. There's certain elements of your human design that handle stress and risk a little bit better. For example, if you have a profile line 3 or 6, you might be better equipped for this type of risk, as well as people with defined hearts or ego centers. If you're someone who has a line 1, security is like your most important necessity, like having that secure foundation. So I have a line 1 in my unconscious profile line. Line 1s handle that stress of insecurity a lot less well than people who have that 3 or that 6. Also, if you have an undefined or open G center or a G center that's still deconditioning, you might not handle that stress so well either. And you might have, this isn't like an exact correlation. I'm just giving you some things to maybe look at from a human design perspective to understand how you might tolerate that risk. I'm not here to say that you can't go all in or you shouldn't go all in, but I really invite you to make sure that you've at least seen and considered all sides before you make this decision. Because when you're faced with this pressure to go all in, here are some of the ways that you might experience it and help you understand, start to discern and understand what your tolerance is and if you're ready to make that leap for yourself. So, starting with the head center, which, as you remember, is the pressure to ask questions, to get answers, the pressure for ideas and inspiration, and the pressure to figure it all out with your mind. Here's something what you might experience. At this point in your journey, you might probably be or are already constantly bombarded with the common trope of just going all in on your business, which might influence you to believe that that's the only way you're ever going to be able to succeed. The way that it's positioned is the only way you're ever going to find success in your business is if you focus all your energy and intention into it. And this can especially impact anyone with that open or undefined head center or open or undefined ajna center. So the top two centers at in your human design chart, if you have those open or undefined, that hearing that trope and hearing that like constant chatter about going all in, you might be influenced by that more than others. You might find yourself also stuck in a question loop if you're at this phase where you're considering this, asking how long will it take for my business to take off if X, Y, and Z, or what's the best way to do this to speed up my progress and to get my business up and running as quickly as possible. You might also hyper focus on figuring out the best practices, the habits, the processes of other successful businesses and try to copy them yourself, even if they are misaligned. You might just focus on just trying to copy paste someone else's business so that you can be a success as quickly as possible. You might also catch yourself hyper focused on your financials and bank accounts, almost mentally willing them to move in a secure direction, and maybe even feeling despair if they don't move in the direction that you're mentally you're trying to telepathically will them to increase. It might feel very challenging or hard, discouraging if they aren't. Another mental pressure that you might feel is you might catch yourself developing shiny object syndrome as a way to save yourself, to save yourself and save your business if things don't go exactly to plan. So if you're, building a certain offer or you're building something out and you feel like it's not going to plan, you might say, oh, well, maybe I need to build this instead. And so you've started all these different projects that you can't finish because you're trying to find the thing that's going to save you and save your business. And finally, the last mind center mental pressure that you will feel. This depends on if your head center is defined or undefined, but you're going to experience this pressure differently in terms of the shiny object syndrome or, the being hyper focused on just figuring out all the different things you need to do to build your business. But you're going to experience this pressure slightly differently. It might be a constant force of pressure, or it might be in those high highs and those low lows, depending on if it's defined or not defined. Or it could be intense and then non-existent, depending on your environment and your surroundings, if that you have that undefined. So that's a lot of the mental pressure and the pressure to figure it all out if you are at this stage of wanting to go all in. So let's change gears a little bit and go to the root center, which, as you remember, is the pressure to take action, to move forward, to make progress. And you might experience this in a number of ways. You might just take that leap and go all in before you're truly ready or before you've even reflected on what your risk tolerance truly is. You might just be like, yep, I feel the pressure to act. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. You might also, feel the root center pressure of following that, you might actually follow that shiny object syndrome. So the mental pressure of the shiny object syndrome teams up with the root center pressure to actually take action on that shiny object syndrome. And you'll spread yourself too thin in an attempt to diversify and almost mitigate that risk that comes with going all in by trying to just have your hand in all the honey pots. Another way that you will experience that root center pressure is that you could mistake the nerves of excitement and readiness with those of fear. So growing up as a competitive athlete, we were often told, when you're feeling nerves before a race, And it's like, are those the nerves of fear because you're scared to get up on the blocks, or are those the nerves of excitement because something cool is going to happen when you race? And so I think a lot of us can get the nerves of excitement and the nerves of fear confused, or just not understand where those nerves are coming from. So I think when you're under that pressure, it's really hard to discern where those nerves are coming from. And the last big way that you will experience this root center pressure is that you might, want to, or actually decide to invest in a whole bunch of programs or courses that are those business in a box type programs, or teach you to do a specific thing about your business, and are going to teach you everything that you need to know, or supposedly teach you everything that you need to know about creating a profitable business. And by doing so, you're digging yourself in a big financial hole before you've even truly begun your business journey. And these are all things to really just keep an eye out for, because you will feel that pressure. So it's about noticing that pressure before you act on that pressure, and figuring out, again, like where the motivation is coming from to take that action. And similar to the head center, depending on if your root center is defined or undefined, you're going to experience this pressure differently. So again, it might be, if you have it defined, it's going to be that constant force of pressure. Or if you have it undefined, you're going to feel those high highs and those low lows, where it's intense, and then an intense feeling of pressure, and then maybe it's non-existent, depending on what your environment and your surroundings are. So if you're at, or you're approaching, this inflection point in your own journey, here are some important considerations and action steps. I've gone through a lot of what's important at this stage. I've gone through how you're going to experience this pressure. And if you're at this stage, here are the steps that I recommend you take, or the steps that I wish I could have told myself to take at this stage. So it's really important to just check in with both your mind and your heart, your head center and your root center. When you're feeling this pressure, or you're about to make this decision, it's important to understand, what is your tolerance to risk? What's the motivation behind this pressure that you're feeling? Like, why do you feel the need to go all in? And to get really clear with what is driving that pressure in the first place. And is it your pressure that you're feeling, or is it the pressure of other people telling you that you need to go all in on your business? So if you do have a business already, and you're just debating whether it's time to quit your day job or whatever, if your business isn't making enough currently to replace your current income, imagine how it would feel if you had more cash going out than coming in for a few months. So that's a very common thing. If you go all in, that there's going to be, even if you have cash saved up before you go all in, it's really important to just, how would you feel if whatever, number you have saved in the bank goes down month over month for a little bit? Like, how would that make you feel? I have this question and a couple more to just assess your ability to tolerate that risk of going all in, and how your body might handle the stress and the risk that's associated with that. Another question to consider is, how would you feel about and manage the fluctuating revenue and customers each month that come with starting a newer business? And the last question to consider to assess your risk tolerance is, how would you feel if a launch failed? If you put all your time and energy into something and it didn't get the result that you wanted, like, how would you handle that? Like, how would you handle that stress? The next thing to really consider, or to just know and to remind yourself, is that the trope is to go all in. It's like all or nothing. It is like black or white, cut and dry. You're all in on your business, or you're messing around and your business will never succeed. The real truth, if you're going to take anything away from this entire conversation and contemplation that I'm having with you right now, is that it's not all or nothing. You don't have to be all in on your business or nothing. There's a wide range of, like, a middle ground that you can be in. You can be full-time in your business. You can be full-time in your career. You can be part-time in one or the other, or both. You can have multiple income streams. That was one of my solutions, was, even though I was focusing on my business, I picked up two or three, I think three part-time jobs to support the business, so that I had multiple streams of income to support me. And that was, like, critical to me coming back to that center and that balance and mitigating the stress that I was experiencing from going all in. So think about like what small changes can you make, when you're thinking about this and it's like going all in or not, or creating, ultimately what you're doing is you're creating an environment that is a step in the direction that you want to head. You don't have to go all in or nothing. If you do want to go all in on your business someday, but right now is not the time, what incremental steps can you take to go in that direction? What small changes can you make right now to just create a little bit more space on a secure foundation today? Like, how can you keep that secure foundation or inch towards what your goal of going all in is, but staying secure and like doing that dance and balance of security with giving yourself the space to work on your business with more capacity and more bandwidth towards your business. It's really important as you take steps towards that you continue to just, whatever environment you create or whatever steps you take towards that, it's important that that environment or that situation is something that you can live with indefinitely if needed. If you get to the point where you're like, yep, I've hit my limit, and it takes you months or a year before you're ready to take the next step, it's like, can you live with where you're at? So it's that balance of taking steps towards your dream and also keeping, like, managing and mitigating the stress and the risk that's associated with it. It's about every day and like in the present moment and creating a situation that you can be happy with and that gives you the balance of those things that you desire and that you need. And creating that situation where you can find joy and enthusiasm in the journey today and tomorrow and the next day and make adjustments as needed. How can you pull out gratitude for where you're at today, for what that next little step is, and that next little step is as you step towards what your goal is for going all in on your business? Another thing that was really helpful for me at some point, at that point, and I think is really helpful for a lot of people that I work with, is decide your jumping off point. Like, what is the point where you feel comfortable going all in? Is it a certain revenue? Is it a certain amount of cash saved up in your bank account? Is it being at a certain place in your business? If you're taking baby steps towards going all in on your business at some point, or you do want to go all in right now, it's not the right time kind of thing. Like, what is the jumping off point? Like, pick something objective that helps you know that you like are ready instead of just continually putting it off into the future and not really being sure. Another important tip that I have for you is to have a backup plan. Like, have an idea of when will you know that something needs to change. So if you do decide to go all in on your business and things aren't going the way that you'd hoped, or maybe they are going the way you hope, but it's like, what are the parameters? Like, what are the guideposts that help you know objectively if something needs to change? Do you need to pick up a part-time job? Are you ready to let go of that full-time job finally? Like, that kind of goes with the last point, but it's like, it's kind of important to just have some objective parameters that if something happens, okay, I have a barrier in my savings account where I know if it hits that, I need, like, no questions, I'm just going to go look for a part-time job. Or, just kind of have like parameters and plans for what can happen so that like, you feel comfortable with the situation that you're in and know what you're going to do if you get to the point where things aren't as comfortable for you anymore. And again, like, no matter what, just have gratitude for this journey, no matter where you're at, because it's your journey, and this decision to go all in on your business is yours, and there's a million ways that you can do it. Again, going back to my earlier point, assess your personal ability to balance that risk and your ability to mitigate stress, and create an incremental plan that gets you towards what your goal is. You don't have to go all in just because that's what you think you have to do. You don't have to go all in and quit your job and focus solely on your business just because that's what other people tell you to do. The decision is up to you. And it's about assessing what is right for you and taking those steps that also prioritize your health and mental health and wellness and all of those things, your family, like everything, all of your responsibilities. Don't go all in because you've heard it's the only way to do things. It's not. There's so many other ways that you can build your business and you can devote time to your business. It's not black or white. It's not go all in and quit everything or your business is never going to take off. But do go all in if and when you feel clear and confident that that is your next step. If you know deep down and you've set those parameters, you have the backup plan, if you know deep down that it's the best way to motivate yourself and to allow your business the space and the creativity to bloom, and you've kind of thought about the scenarios, that backup plan, and you feel confident in what you've done, absolutely. Like if you're ready to go all in, go all in. And you can do it in a way that also doesn't frazzle your nervous system. That is my biggest learning of my own journey to share with you is like, I thought had I done all these things, I think I would have done it differently. But ultimately, if I were to do this all over again, I would prioritize my nervous system and keeping my nervous system safe and healthy versus just doing what I heard I should do, which was quit my job and go into my business. It's really important that you listen to your intuition each step of the way and to know what your next aligned step is and your alignment cues. This inflection point is a big one. And it's an important one. It's a big mountain to climb in a way. I don't know how to describe it, but this is a big one and it shouldn't be taken lightly for sure. And I think, the whole reason that the past, 6, 7 podcast episodes have truly focused on your intuition, like lead up to some of these points, like this one, like listening to your intuition each step of the way to know whether going all in on your business is aligned for you or not. And to use your alignment cues, your signature, your human design signature types, signature or not self, to check in with your own alignment along the way. Fear is truly what drives that pressure, your pressure centers that you feel in your mind and your root. Fear is like what's pushing you, driving you forward, but trust, surrender, and following your intuition are what keep that mental pressure and that root center pressure in check. So it's all about having the tools to discern and assess and manage and mitigate the pressure that fear and insecurity and fear of missing out and all of those things you're feeling through the root and the mind center pressure centers. If aligning your business and your marketing strategy to your human design is something that's calling to you, you can take the first steps forward in my free new workshop series, Human Design, Marketing Strategy, and Business Alignment. This workshop series lays the foundation for creating and implementing an effective marketing strategy using your human design, a marketing strategy that aligns with your unique energy so you can continue to grow, build, and scale your purpose-driven business with less force, less frustration, and less burnout. You can find the link below in the episode description. If you liked what you heard today or you resonated with anything that I talked about, make sure you share this episode with your business besties, tagging me at Brie Couric or leaving me a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. In the next episode of the Frequency and Flow podcast and the 4th episode of 6 in the Pressurized Soulpreneur podcast series, I'm going to be discussing the pressure around the 3rd major inflection point that small business owners face and how to navigate it. The pressure to have the perfect sales and marketing strategy in your business. I'll see you there.